The day I got the keys to my apartment should have been one of the happiest days of my life. For 7 years, I had worked toward that moment. While my friends traveled, I picked up extra shifts. While coworkers upgraded their cars, I drove the same aging sedan with peeling paint. Every paycheck was carefully divided between bills, necessities, and a savings account, labeled simply, home. There were nights when I came home from the hospital, so exhausted that I fell asleep on the couch, still wearing my scrubs. There were weekends when I worked double shifts while everyone else enjoyed their time off. It wasn't glamorous, but I had a goal. And finally, at 32 years old, I achieved it. A bright 2-bedroom apartment on the 5th floor of a beautiful building downtown. The place wasn't huge, but it was mine. Every wall, every window, every corner represented years of sacrifice. When I stood alone in the empty living room holding the keys, tears filled my eyes. I did it, I whispered. A few months later, I married Ryan. At first, life felt perfect. Ryan moved into the apartment, and together we transformed it into a warm and comfortable home. We painted the walls, bought furniture, and spent lazy Sunday mornings drinking coffee on the balcony. Then there was Ryan's mother, Diane. From the beginning, something about her attitude bothered me. During her first visit after the wedding, she walked through every room with her arms folded. She said, inspecting the kitchen, "Not bad." I laughed awkwardly. "Thanks, it took me years to save for it." Diane smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. "Well, now it's part of the family assets." I assumed she was joking. Unfortunately, she wasn't. Over the following months, Diane made similar comments whenever she visited. Our family's apartment, Ryan's property, the family's investment. Each time I corrected her politely. I bought it before Ryan and I got married. She would simply wave her hand dismissively. Marriage changes everything. The comments became more frequent after Ryan unexpectedly lost his job. It happened without warning. One Friday afternoon, his company announced major layoffs. By evening, Ryan was unemployed. I felt terrible for him. I never complained about supporting us financially. I paid the mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, and every other expense while he searched for work. I believed that's what partners do during difficult times. But something changed. Ryan began spending more time with Diane. Long lunches, phone calls that lasted hours, private conversations that stopped whenever I entered the room. Soon Diane started appearing at our apartment almost daily. At first, she claimed she was helping Ryan cope with unemployment. Then she began criticizing everything: the furniture arrangement, the grocery brands I bought, the amount of money I spent, even the way I organized my own kitchen. One afternoon, I came home from work to find Diane sitting at my dining table with a stack of papers. Ryan sat beside her. Both looked unusually serious. "Emma," Diane said, "please sit down." A knot formed in my stomach. "What is this about?" She folded her hands and smiled. "We've been discussing family finances." I looked at Ryan. He avoided eye contact. Then Diane slid a document across the table. My heart nearly stopped when I read the title. "Monthly Family Rent Agreement. What's this?" I asked. Diane's smile widened. "Since the apartment is family property now, you'll be paying $1,500 a month in rent to the family account." I stared at her. Certain I had misunderstood. "My apartment, family apartment," she corrected. "No." The word escaped before I could stop it. Diane's expression instantly hardened. "You live here, don't you? I own this place." She leaned forward. "Not anymore. Once you married Ryan, this became part of the family. It's only fair that you contribute properly." I looked at my husband, expecting him to laugh and tell me his mother was being ridiculous. Instead, Ryan quietly nodded. And in that moment, sitting at my own dining table, inside the apartment I had worked 7 years to buy, I felt like a stranger in my own home. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ryan sitting beside his mother, silently agreeing while Diane demanded rent for the apartment I had purchased with my own money. The betrayal hurt far more than the demand itself. I expected Diane to be unreasonable. I never expected Ryan to support her. The next morning, I tried to have a calm conversation with him. "Ryan, tell me honestly," I said while making coffee. "Do you actually believe I should pay rent for my own apartment?" He rubbed his forehead. "It's not exactly rent." I stared at him. "The document literally says rent." He sighed. "My mom thinks family members should contribute equally." "I already contribute equally." "No, Emma, you contribute financially." The words hit me like a slap. "What does that mean?" Ryan looked away. "It means you're acting like the apartment belongs only to you." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Because it does belong to me." The argument lasted nearly an hour and ended nowhere. For the first time since our marriage, I felt completely alone. Over the next several weeks, Diane became more aggressive. She called constantly. She criticized every financial decision I made. And she repeatedly reminded me about the rent agreement. Finally, after relentless pressure from both Diane and Ryan, I made a decision. I would pay, but not because I agreed. I would pay because I wanted evidence. Every month, I transferred exactly $1,500 into the account Diane controlled. And every month, I saved the receipts, I printed bank statements, I archived emails, I stored text messages. I created a folder on my computer labeled simply, Family Property. If Diane wanted to play games, I intended to know every rule. 3 months passed, then 4. The situation became worse. One Saturday afternoon, I returned home from grocery shopping and discovered Diane rearranging my living room furniture. "What are you doing?" I asked. She didn't even look guilty. "The room flows better this way. This is my home." She laughed. "Our home?" The correction made my blood boil, yet I stayed calm. I simply watched, and I kept documenting everything. A few weeks later, I attended a family barbecue hosted by Ryan's cousin. What I heard there shocked me. Several relatives congratulated Diane on her real estate investment. At first, I didn't understand. Then one cousin casually said, "It's amazing that you helped buy Emma and Ryan's apartment." I nearly dropped my drink. "What do you mean?" The cousin looked confused. Diane told everyone she invested a large amount into the purchase. My stomach sank. That evening, I realized the truth. The rent payments were never about helping the family. They were never about finances. They were about control. Diane wanted ownership, not legal ownership, psychological ownership. She wanted everyone, including me, to believe the apartment belonged to her. The next Monday, I scheduled a meeting with the attorney who had handled my apartment purchase years earlier. I brought every document I owned, every contract, every payment record, every receipt. The lawyer spent nearly an hour reviewing everything. Finally, he looked up and smiled. "Emma, this is one of the clearest ownership cases I've ever seen." "What does that mean?" "It means the apartment belongs entirely to you." Relief flooded through me. Then he continued, "Actually, there's more." I leaned forward. "What?" "The prenuptial agreement you and Ryan signed before marriage provides additional protection. Neither your husband nor his mother has any legal claim whatsoever." For the first time in months, I felt hopeful. The attorney then examined the folder containing Diane's rent demands. His expression darkened. "She's been collecting money while claiming ownership." "Yes," he slowly nodded. "Keep every record." "Why?" The lawyer closed the folder carefully. Because if she's falsely representing herself as an owner and collecting money under that claim, she may have created a very serious problem for herself. As I walked back to my car, something inside me changed. For months, Diane believed she was winning. She believed I was weak. She believed I would eventually surrender. But she had made one mistake. She underestimated the woman who had spent 7 years fighting for her dream home. And soon, everyone was going to learn the truth. Diane's birthday dinner was announced like a royal event. "Everyone is coming," Ryan told me casually one evening, as if it meant nothing. I already knew what everyone meant. Her friends, her relatives, the same people who had been hearing for months that she helped invest in our apartment. I smiled politely, of course. I said, but inside, something had shifted. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't confused anymore. I was prepared. That evening, I dressed simply but confidently. Not to impress anyone, but to stay calm. I placed a thin folder in my handbag before leaving. Inside it were copies of every payment, every contract, every document that proved the truth. Ryan noticed it. "What's that?" he asked. "Just something I might need." I replied. He frowned but didn't ask further. When we arrived, Diane greeted guests like a queen receiving her court. She wore a deep red dress and stood at the center of attention, laughing loudly, enjoying every word spoken about her. And then I heard it again, the apartment she helped secure for Ryan and Emma. My jaw tightened. She was performing. Dinner was perfect for her. Wine flowed, conversations blurred, compliments were exchanged like currency. Then, halfway through dessert, Diane tapped her glass. "Before we continue," she said, smiling toward the room, "I just want to say how proud I am of our family property. It's been wonderful seeing Emma finally contribute her share of rent every month." A few people laughed politely. Some nodded. My chest tightened, but I stayed still. Ryan shifted uncomfortably beside me, but said nothing. Diane continued, clearly enjoying herself. "Family should always share everything," she said, "and I've always believed in fairness." That was the moment I stood up. The room went quiet instantly. "I have a question," I said calmly. Diane smiled, thinking it was harmless. "Of course, dear." I opened my folder. "If this apartment is family property," I said slowly, "can you show us any proof that you contributed to its purchase?" Silence. The air changed immediately. Someone coughed awkwardly. Diane's smile flickered. "Excuse me, I'm just asking for clarity." I continued. "A bank transfer, a mortgage payment, a contract, anything showing your investment." Ryan stared at me now. I wasn't finished. "Because I have every document showing I purchased it alone, every payment, every legal record. I've also been paying $1,500 monthly under the assumption this was rent for a property I don't legally share with anyone." A murmur spread through the room. I placed the documents on the table, one by one. Purchase agreement, bank statements, ownership certificate, and finally the rent payments. The total silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. Diane's face slowly changed color. "This is unnecessary," she said sharply. "No," I replied. "What's unnecessary is collecting money based on something that isn't true." A relative whispered something under their breath. Another shook their head. Ryan finally spoke, but his voice was weak. "Mom, is this true?" For the first time, Diane didn't answer immediately. That hesitation said everything. I looked at her directly. "From this moment," I said, "there will be no more payments." The room stayed frozen. And for the first time since this began, Diane realized something she never expected. She was no longer in control. The silence after that dinner followed me home like a shadow. No one spoke during the drive. Ryan kept his eyes on the road, gripping the steering wheel too tightly. Diane left separately, without saying goodbye. For the first time since she entered my life, she had nothing to say. But silence doesn't mean resolution. It means aftermath. The next morning, my phone lit up repeatedly. Unknown relatives, confused messages, and finally Ryan. "We need to talk," he wrote. I already knew what that meant. When he came into the kitchen, he looked exhausted, not angry, just drained. "My mother is saying you embarrassed her," he said carefully. I didn't react. I just poured tea. I didn't embarrass her. I replied. She embarrassed herself the moment she started collecting rent for something she doesn't own. He rubbed his face. I didn't know everything she told people. That's the problem, Ryan. I said softly, "You didn't ask." That hit harder than any argument. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he finally admitted it. I thought she was just trying to help the family. By taking money from me, he didn't answer. Days passed, then a formal letter arrived at Diane's house, drafted by my attorney. It was polite, firm, and unmistakable. Cease all false claims of ownership. Return all collected funds. Do not misrepresent property status again. Within a week, the family dynamics shifted. Relatives who once repeated Diane's version of events began asking questions. Some even apologized to me quietly. Diane didn't like that. She called me once, her voice sharp with anger. "You think you've won," she snapped. "I don't think in terms of winning." I said calmly, "I think in terms of truth." She hung up. But the truth had already spread too far to contain. A month later, a portion of the money was quietly returned. Not with an apology. Diane was not the type to give one, but with silence that spoke louder than words. Ryan changed after that. He became quieter, more reflective. He stopped repeating his mother's phrases. He started noticing things he hadn't before. One evening, he said something unexpected. "I should have protected you." I looked at him for a long moment. "Yes," I said, "you should have." It wasn't said with anger, just honesty. Eventually, I made a decision that surprised even myself. I sold the apartment, not because I lost it emotionally, but because I had outgrown the place where I felt trapped. The walls that once represented my achievement now carried too many memories of control and manipulation. I bought a new home a few weeks later, smaller in some ways, bigger in peace. Only my name was on the deed. Diane was furious when she found out I had moved on completely. No access, no influence, no more narrative she could twist. But there was nothing left for her to hold on to. No leverage, no illusion, just consequences. One afternoon, I sat on my new balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the sunlight fall across a quiet street. My phone stayed silent. My mind, for the first time in a long time, was clear. Ryan later asked if there was any chance to rebuild what we had. I didn't answer immediately, because forgiveness isn't a moment. It's a process. But I knew one thing for sure. I would never again confuse love with control, and I would never again let anyone charge me rent for the life I built with my own hands. That was my real revenge, not destruction, not arguments, not humiliation, but peace. And this time it was mine completely.